Welcome everyone, I'm Fabrizio, and this video is about rendering, and in particular we're going to see something a little bit more pro about rendering in Fusion 360. A Fusion 360 rendering engine is totally not that bad, but of course you need to know it, and there are a few tricks about it that I'm going to show you now. The first one is probably also the most important, and it is the one that you should model only the parts and detailing the parts that you plan to show to the public. In this case, as you can see, we have this camera, this Canon camera. It is quite detailed, but actually I simply modeled the front part because I didn't plan to show also the back face of this camera. In fact, as you can see, the back part of this object is just sketchy, and it is not detailed at all. And this basically allows me to focus my attentions only on the front part, and so I can get a really good result with the same time. And you should of course put your efforts on the objects that are going to be nearer to the camera. And as you can see, we have many decals applied to the lens objective. The rubber band is very detailed as well, and this yellow texture is modeled. And as you can see, the final render is I think quite good. And it is rendered in Fusion 360, even if actually I imported the HDR background from Keyshot. You know, those chairs are actually on one of the default environments in Keyshot. I just take the HDR to Fusion 360. And then, of course, I just edited it a little bit with the Photoshop, but anyway, my suggestion is model only what you will need to the render and what you want to show to the public. Of course, if you plan later to realize something like animation or something like a section view or an explosion, you need to model the interior part as well. But if you want just to realize something like that, something like this picture, you can just realize the external part of your object. You won't need the detailing inside as well. Actually, I know that most of us are like maniacs. We really love to detailing everything because this is something like a creation, but save your time because that's really precious. Well, next suggestion is to be careful about the differences between our renders and the reality. In fact, this scene, of course, is already in high level in rendering skills. I didn't realize this render, and I don't think it's Fusion 360 made. But I think this is a bad example of rendering, and I took this picture because we're going to analyze the problems that it has. The point is that the reality is totally not like that, but it's more about something like this. The reality is always disordered, it's dirty, and of course in this picture is a little bit too much, but the reality is never perfect. We have dust, we have rusty things. You should always try to include in your scene some disturbing elements, few imperfections, something like dirt, something like a misplaced object, something like not really aligned to the others. And of course, for example, if you want to realize something like a computer, you must realize the cables and the wires as well. You know, in the reality, there are many cables, many wires. And so if you want to realize a rendering without the cables, but you have many computers, many monitors, that really looks like a fake monitor. So if you want to realize a photorealistic picture, you need to model the wires as well. Like this render, that maybe it's a 10 years old render, maybe. it's really old, but anyway, you should focus on cables and try to mess the cables up. Now we have another example of what I mean. This is a pedal chair. Of course, this is almost useless. But I make this example because this object is quite interesting, maybe. And we need to be careful about how positioning our mechanical parts, because as you see, these pedals, they are not really well placed, because this is not actually a real position of the pedals. If you look at the picture, you will never see the pedals really aligned on this main axis. And this is something you won't see in reality. So if you want to realize a good rendering, you should position our mechanical parts in another way, like this. So you should move the pedals, rotate them, and destroy the symmetry of the model. So this is another example. This is another suggestion, and it is that you should fillet every sharp edge in the model. For example, these buttons, most of the designers would have realized them with a sharp edge with a 90-degree angle, but the nature actually tells us that there aren't any sharp edges in the nature. Even a sharp razor blade, if we look at it with a microscope, we will find a small radius that rounds the edge a little bit. So even if in the nature we have a sharp edge, we should always put a fillet, at least a small radius on the fillet, but we should fillet everything. Of course, if it's something like 1 micron radius, we do not have to, but otherwise always fillet everything. The point is that in the reality we never have an on-off transition on the shadows of our model, and in order to achieve such a result, we must round the edges. So this is really an important suggestion. And of course, from a modeling perspective, you should fillet everything as your last feature. So try to fillet on once the model is almost finished. My next suggestion is about materials, and in particular I think that we should assign the materials and name the materials once they are applied to our object. For example, in this scene you can see that there are many materials, and I pick one, and it's chrome. But what's chrome? Maybe in this scene that I modeled a week ago, I don't remember the object assignment. So I can right click and select objects applied to. But as you know, Fusion isn't really famous for being fast nor for being stable, so we cannot find the assignment this way, because it is going to be really a time waster procedure. For example, I do have 3 blue materials, and I may be wondering which one is the one in the cockpit, and so I need to search one by one. And so I suggest you to name the materials once you applied them to the scene. Unfortunately, Autodesk developers don't allow us to search for materials applied to the scene. They just introduced a search box for the library materials. That was good, but actually this is not enough, because if I have many materials in the scene, I'd really love to search for them, because otherwise I waste a lot of time. So thank you, Autodesk. Try to introduce maybe this feature. And then my other suggestion is to apply different materials to different objects, even if the materials are really close together. Well, on the same perspective, I have another suggestion, that is to apply materials while you are designing and not after the design is completed. That's because it is going to be easier to apply materials, because otherwise I should isolate every single component and apply the materials to every single small part. As you can see, I'm still in a concept phase of this vehicle, but I've already applied the muffler exhaust system materials, so I won't waste 6 hours in order to apply materials to every single screw, to every single rivet, because it would be really time wasting. I should find them in the drop down menu. It is going to be really time consuming. So apply materials while you are designing. And of course, you should apply texture mapping as well while you are designing, and not once your design is complete. The main command is this one. It's texture map controls. You have to click it and select your object, and then change the mapping setting. Most of the time, automatic mapping setting is really not that good, so 99% of the time I use the box mapping setting. That is, of course, not perfect, but it's really close to what I usually need most of the time. Actually, we find a few texture wrapping that is not really good, but of course we cannot control textures mapping like in a mesh software, but this is parametric, so we won't ever have an UV mapping channel like we would have in Blender or in 3D Studio Max or in Maya. But box mapping 99% of the time is quite okay. So as resume, apply textures, apply materials while you are designing, and not after the design is completed. Well, now we just spoke about texture, and I'd really love to give you an advice about texture, and it is about texture tiling. And the suggestion is to avoid texture tiling. So you should always create seamless textures, otherwise you're going to have these bounds, these strange straight lines, because those are the bounds of the picture, and those are really unrealistic, and you should always avoid them. So in order to create a seamless picture, I duplicate 4 times the texture, and then I'm going to mirror the texture. So I go to Edit. Of course, this is the Italian version of Photoshop, and you're going to find Edit, and then I go to transform, and then I use flip horizontally or vertically, and of course I need to well, you know, I must flip it in order to remove the lines, the straight lines. This time, as you can see, we removed the lines, but we created something like something strange because of the mirroring, but we're going to fix that later. So now we're going to flip this picture as well. So transform, then flip horizontally. And as you can see, the texture tiling line is gone. Now transform, flip horizontally and flip vertically. So we need to mirror it on 2 axes. And now we destroyed the texture tiling bounds, but now we have these mirror artifacts that we're going to fix. But just in order to show you that now this is a seamless picture, I'm going to show you. So I crop a little bit, and then I'll repeat this texture and copy it here. And as you can see, we no more have a strong line as a separation of the texture. How to fix the mirror artifacts that we created because of the mirror. We go to the patch, we select origin, and then we just drag a strange form like a balloon on the mirror lines, and then we drag our selection in another point of our texture, like here. Okay, and we release the drag. As you can see, the mirror line now is gone, and we are improving the texture tiling of our texture because we are making it seamless. And of course we should repeat this procedure on every single point of the two lines, the vertical and the horizontal line of our texture. In this way you're going to create a seamless texture. Of course, if you are rich people and lazy people, you can find on the net many websites that will download you seamless textures. But as I show you, you can create seamless texture in Photoshop as well. It is going to be not that hard. Maybe you are going to waste a little bit more time, but it is definitely possible to create a seamless texture in Photoshop in a few minutes. Okay, now let's go back to our bad rendering, bad interior rendering. I don't really like it because of many reasons, but I think that the worst thing at all is that we have too many polished surfaces, like this one, for instance. It's like a mirror, and you will never find in the reality such a polished surface. Also here we do have a really reflective surface. It's really not that real. This sounds like a poor rendering quality image. Also the roof, as you can see, it's all about reflection in this scene. It's really bad. Also the TV screen it's too polished. Those are maybe good looking materials in the preview of your rendering software, but you should always turn the roughness of the material at least a little bit. And Fusion 360 do have many materials, many too much polished materials, like this titanium polished. It's like a mirror. It's a completely a fake material. This is totally not good. So most of the time I tune the roughness a little bit up. You should never use roughness 0, even if you are rendering a mirror. You should never use roughness 0. I always use 0.1 or so. So always avoid 0.0 something. This is actually a problem that also Keyshot has. It has too many materials too polished, like this titanium. It's like a mirror. It's a completely nonsense material. So I always tune the roughness at least a little bit. So avoid too shiny materials, because those are going to ruin your render, to totally waste your render. Like for example, this frame from Star Wars. Actually, this is not the frame I really loved to show you, but I didn't find the proper one. As you can see in this scene, we do have too many reflections. This is completely a fake picture. You can tell that as you see the image. You can say this is a render. This is a mirror spaceship. It's not that real. So always be careful with the reflections and with the polished materials, especially metal materials, because most of rendering software don't have proper metal materials. Now let's dive a little bit in our rendering environment in Fusion 360. Since now we just spoke about how to prepare your model for the final render. Now let's try to focus on the rendering setting of our scene. As you know, the default HDR background is a photo booth or an interior HDR picture, but those are not really exciting. Because the rendering result are going to give you a flat picture and not a really amazing tone of your object. The point is that but most of the time these interior background aren't of a great quality. I think that Fusion 360 developers should give us more options, and the result of this poor choice is that many people actually prefer to use an outdoor HDR picture, like maybe this one, this green field. The point is that you should use this background very carefully, because for example, why should a racing car be put on a grass green field? This would look like really weird as render, because it's like a nonsense. It's totally misplaced, this object on this background. So you should choose the proper background according to the situation. Another hot HDR used in Fusion 360 is this Plaza. There is quite a good HDR background. The point is that even the Plaza is not suitable for every rendering. And for example, if I am modeling a flashlight, why should I put a flashlight render inside of a giant square Plaza? That would be a nonsense. So try to download from the net a proper HDR background, and if you don't find any, you can of course always purchase an HDR background, but you know, it may be a little bit expensive sometimes. So what I usually do is to keep the environment, but to switch the background to a solid color, and most of the time I also enable reflection on the background. And as you can see now, I can benefit from the complex reflections, complex highlighting of the HDR background, but I do not have to worry about a misplaced object in the background. Like for example, now we could have a green field as light source, but I won't see the light source. Look at this carbon fiber. These reflections are really good also in the rim, but I do not see the wrong environment that's sourcing my light, and this is a really good idea, especially if you don't find a proper HDR background. So this is what I do most of the time. I keep maybe the wrong HDR, but as long as I put a solid color background, no one is really going to know that I'm using a completely misplaced HDR background, HDR environment. If you don't really like solid color backgrounds, you can always try to tweak a little bit your HDR background. Like for example, now we do have our racing car and our road. So this is a car, this is a road, but you know, it doesn't look really good, this scene, because I suppose this car to be on a racing track and not on a Texas highway. So we should try to find a different perspective, and if we cannot, there's a suggestion that I want to give you, that is to tweak the flattening of the floor. So we should flatten the ground with this option, just check it, and as you can see now, we can try to tweak our perspective, maybe working also on the camera length, on the lens length, or on the exposure. As you can see, once I tweak a little bit with the flattened ground and with the camera point of view, I can achieve a completely different result from the original HDR background, because now our racing car is going to look like a little bit more like if it were on a racing track. So the rendering is now quite good. I think the scene, the result scene is going to look a little bit better than before. And if you cannot properly tune your background, you can always use the ground scale handle like so. And as you can see, while adjusting the ground scale, you're going to achieve a completely different looking HDR background. So this may be another option. Of course, maybe sometimes you may not fix it with the ground scale, but just give it a try. And my next suggestion is to always try to set an interesting point of view of your scene and of your object as well. That's because a wrong camera placement is going to waste your efforts, and you're going to produce otherwise a not so interesting picture and not so amazing picture. So always try to put the camera in a position where it's going to show maybe the detailing work you've done in your model, and try not to look your object in a strange perspective. Like now, this is a racing car. I supposed to create a render from a human point of view, so I almost will never look at this car from the top. I'm going to look it from something like a front view or something, and try maybe to look at your object from the bottom, because this way you're going to improve the importance of your model, the dynamic of your model. You're going to have better results if you put the camera as down as possible. You will enhance the importance of the model definitely. For example, I really love this point of view because this camera setting, this camera position is going to show all the detailing work I did on the mufflers and on the shark fin on the side. And so I'm going to enhance my modeling skills and enhance my rendering result as well. So always try to choose an original placement. My next suggestion is to try not to let the public guess the rendering software you used for your pictures. For example, this scene, I'm sure 100% that is rendered in Keyshot, because this is the typical background of Keyshot. It's you can find it in the default library, and many users use it. And so I see it and I think maybe this render is cheap, it's not that professional, it's like all the others renders. So try to avoid that idea. And if I want to achieve a professional appeal to my renderings, I need to choose an original background that not many people have already seen. Or at least I must try to find an original placement of the camera for my background. Like for example, in this work I made for Autodesk a few months ago. I don't think that any of you can recognize the background. That is actually the same that we just used for our racing car. And so I used this background in order to achieve that rendering. And so as you can imagine, I searched for a different point of view for my camera, and of course I didn't show the road. But you are not forced to do so. So, for example, I'll let you show how to arrive to that result. I can, of course, rotate the background and position maybe the drone a little bit far away from the street, and try not to show the street to my public. For example, I could place it here. And as you can see, I don't see the road. Now, maybe I'm going to tweak a little bit on the exposure settings, like so. Okay, and as you can see, now I have a completely different background, and no one can understand that I used the Fusion 360 for rendering. Now that desert highway from Texas simply looks like an sci-fi background. It can work this way. It's now completely different. This is not a misplaced object, even if the HDR background is something not so exciting. So my suggestion is to always try to find different backgrounds, or at least different point of view for your backgrounds. Well, now I'd really like to show you something I made, and as you can see, Fusion 360 can be used as well for interior renderings, and you can achieve quite good result like this one, for example. And of course, Fusion 360 may not be the best solution for interior renderings, but it is definitely possible. Of course, you should always tune a little bit the result in Photoshop, like adding this camera lens flare, or maybe adjust a little bit in color correction or white balance settings. But as you see, interior rendering in Fusion 360, why not? You can achieve quite good result. Now, for example, I'm showing something else. This time, this car is completely a different type from the Formula 1 car that we just saw. So this car could be placed with the success on the Plaza environment. It actually looks pretty good, I think. So again, be careful about the background. If I want to render a Land Rover, of course, I may put in the green field as well. But if I am rendering a street car like this one, of course, I may choose a proper environment like a street, a track, or a city, or something like that. This could work possibly well. Actually, as you can see, this background is particularly useful. I use it a lot of time. For example, even if in this render I used the same background, and again, I don't think that anyone can guess which background is this or what rendering software I used. I simply played a little bit with the exposure settings, and then of course I edited a little bit the picture with the Photoshop, adding these stars over here. But you know, I think this is quite an astonishing result with a few clicks. So give Fusion 360 at least a chance. Okay, perfect. Now, of course, Fusion 360 is mainly focused on the product rendering. So, but you can, of course, realize car rendering or something a little bit different, like watches, like maybe bikes, cars, all sort of stuff. Again, this background is the same Texas road we see before. It's just, I just flattened the ground, and it's this same environment, this same environment, and this same environment. But those four scenes completely look different one from the other. So try to experiment with that concept. And well, I don't have many works I'm proud of, so I think that that's it. If you have a question or something, here I am. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.